We were the last generation to experience true boredom. No phones to scroll, no streaming to binge, just you, a lava lamp, and whatever your imagination could create. We were also the first generation to witness technology change everything. We lived in the sweet spot between analog childhood and digital revolution, and honestly, we got the better deal. The 1970s gave us something that no generation before or since has experienced. The perfect balance between simplicity and innovation. So let's take a look back at 20 memories that defined our childhood. And if you grew up in the 70s, you'll remember every single one of these. When it came to childhood and school, nothing quite captured the spirit of the decade like the dreaded bowl haircut. Every kid seemingly wanted to look like Adam Rich from the TV show 8 is Enough, so they made their parents give them this distinctly 70s style. If you're unfamiliar with a bowl cut, it's exactly what it sounds like. Mom would put a bowl over your head and use scissors to cut around the edges. The resulting haircut made it seem like you were wearing a salad bowl as a hat. But if it was good enough for baseball player Pete Rose and Olympic figure skater Dorothy Hamill, it was good enough for anyone. Speaking of making fashion statements at school, you wouldn't be caught dead in gym class without a classy pair of tube socks. At the time, it was quite the fashion statement, especially if those socks reached all the way up to your knees. Rarely in the history of fashion has a clothing style been universally accepted by both men and women, but that was the case with the shortest of shorts and colorful striped tube socks. The combination was absolutely everywhere. And when lunchtime rolled around, you carried everything in those cool metal lunchboxes. The sturdy tins protected your bologna sandwiches and were often decorated with cartoons, superheroes, or your favorite movie characters. Of course, don't forget the matching thermos that came with it. That was half the appeal of having one of these treasured lunch carriers. But perhaps the most mysterious accessory of all was the mood ring, which claimed it could recognize your emotional state. Blue meant you were calm or relaxed. Amber meant you were nervous or anxious. And black, well, that meant you were about to lose your temper. To calm yourself down, you may have relaxed on your bed and read the latest issue of Tiger Beat magazine. The original teen pop culture magazine was full of posters that kids plastered their bedroom walls with, turning every teenager's room into a shrine to their favorite stars. Those bedroom walls weren't just covered with magazine posters, though. You probably had a lava lamp casting its hypnotic, colorful glow while you played with your Stretch Armstrong, seeing how far you could pull his arms before they snapped back to normal. These simple pleasures defined what it meant to be a kid in the 70s. And if the weather was nice, you'd grab your skateboard and cruise down the street, showing off with your friends. Skateboarding became the newest way to move around the neighborhood and express your personal style. When it came to toys and games, this decade gave us some truly revolutionary entertainment. The very first home video game was Pong, released by Atari in 1972 as a standalone arcade machine that changed everything. This two-dimensional game was meant to be a computerized version of table tennis, involving a white dot slowly bouncing back and forth between two white lines known as paddles. It was simple, but it was absolutely mesmerizing. If you mastered Pong, then you most certainly remember the thrill of destroying enemy ships in the arcade game Space Invaders, which arrived later in the decade and took gaming to an entirely new level of excitement. Of course, not every toy from the 70s was quite so high-tech. One of the most popular was something called clackers, two heavy balls attached to a string that you'd bang together to make noise. They were incredibly satisfying to play with, though they actually turned out to be quite dangerous, and were eventually banned. And then there was the pet rock phenomenon. There's no doubt you begged your parents for $4, so you could buy what was essentially a stone in a box. You got to feed your pet rock, dress it up with googly eyes, and take it for walks just like a real pet. Looking back, it seems absurd, but at the time, everyone had to have one. Television and cartoons created some of our most shared family memories. Who could forget those educational animated shorts that popped up during your usual Saturday morning cartoon lineup? Without you even realizing it, Schoolhouse Rock taught you timeless lessons about grammar, math, politics, and science. The cartoons were funny, and the songs were impossibly catchy. I'm sure you can still sing the entire Conjunction Junction, What's Your Function song without missing a beat. Those Saturday mornings were sacred television time, but weekday evenings belonged to family shows that everyone watched together. For teens, Happy Days was the coolest of shows, but adults also had to get their weekly dose of MASH. These weren't just TV programs. They were cultural touchstones that brought families together around the television set. And if you were brave enough to stay up late, you might have caught some of the very first episodes of Saturday Night Live. This was back when cast members like Chevy Chase, John Belushi, and Gilda Radner were at their absolute best, making the entire country laugh together every weekend. Music and dance completely defined the vibe of the decade. Every decade has its signature sound, and in the 70s, disco reigned supreme. If you were brave enough to venture to an actual disco, you could get down to the sounds of KC and the Sunshine Band, the Bee Gees, and the Tramps. Even the Rolling Stones released a disco track to get in on the trend. If that wasn't enough disco for you, you could strap on some skates and head over to the roller disco for fast-paced parties, complete with shiny outfits, bright lights, and groovy tunes. But disco wasn't the only game in town. Rock and roll bands like the makeup and costume-wearing Kiss and Southern rockers Leonard Skynyrd gave teens an alternative to the disco scene. Meanwhile, Motown was still incredibly relevant, thanks to groups like the Jackson 5, giving everyone something to dance to regardless of their musical preference. The way we consumed all this incredible music was through 8-track tapes, which gained popularity because you could take them with you. Many car manufacturers even included 8-track players in new models, meaning you could listen to whatever you wanted while cruising the streets of your hometown. They weren't the most user-friendly audio format, but you absolutely loved them anyway. When it came to movies and cultural icons, certain moments defined the entire generation. All it took was one seriously terrifying film, Steven Spielberg's Jaws, to keep an entire generation of children out of the ocean. The movie made its big screen debut in the summer of 1975, terrifying the nation with a 25-foot mechanical shark and establishing the concept of the summer blockbuster. It made children and adults alike scan the water for shark fins anytime they went near the beach. Then, when Star Wars first hit theaters in 1977, it was unlike anything the world had ever experienced. The movie was completely immersive, and the special effects were absolutely groundbreaking. If you ask anyone who saw the original Star Wars in theaters about their experience, they'll probably be able to tell you every single detail, right down to how long they waited in line. For many kids, Star Wars defined their entire childhood, and they wanted every piece of merchandise that was released. But perhaps no cultural moment hit harder than the shocking death of Elvis Presley in 1977. There are only a few events that people remember exactly where they were when they heard the news, and this announcement was definitely one of them. The funeral that followed was attended by 75,000 fans lining the streets as the procession made its way through Memphis, and it was televised 2 days later for the millions who couldn't be there in person. These weren't just entertainment moments. They were shared experiences that brought an entire generation together, creating memories that would last a lifetime. The 70s gave us a unique blend of innovation, nostalgia, and pure fun that defined what it meant to grow up during one of America's most interesting decades. So which of these memories hit you the hardest? Drop a comment below and let me know what I missed from your own 70s childhood.